Hey everyone, welcome back to A Bright Idea, a show where I sit down with entrepreneurs to discuss the aha moments that launched their businesses. I'm Amber Key, your host, and thank you so much for listening. I am so excited for today's episode because I had the chance to interview an amazing guest that I must say has been one of my favorite conversations I've had this season. My guest today is Jessica Smith, founder and executive director of the Mental Health Emergency Fund, a nonprofit that destigmatizes the need for mental health in Black and Brown communities by creating pathways of accessibility, affordability, and knowledge sharing. Her primary program is a stipend program that increases financial access to quality mental health for community members on the verge of a crisis who cannot afford out-of-pocket therapeutic services. Jessica was named 40 Under 40 honoree at her alma mater, George Mason University. She uses her public platform to fight against stigmas associated with mental illness and is very open about her own struggles. Jessica has completely bootstrapped her nonprofit, starting with just $500 in funding for the organization during its inception in June 2021, and since then has secured over $131,500 in counting. She is also the host of her own podcast, The Mental Health Emergency Fund, a show that explores the lives of mental health professionals as a tool to help listeners choose the therapist that fits them. No matter where she is, she will always build a strong support system around her because healing happens in the community. This is an incredibly important conversation exploring the access to mental health services and how Jessica is helping people in the city of Baltimore with better options and support. If you live in the city of Baltimore, you can explore funding options based on the requirements on the Mental Health Emergency Fund's website located in the show notes. And if you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis, please call the number 988. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for behind the scenes content and updates. And if you're enjoying the show, leave us a review. It really helps spread the word. Please enjoy this conversation. Jessica, thank you so much for joining A Bright Idea Podcast. I am so excited to talk to you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Like I mentioned to you, I haven't had the time to eat lunch today, but we are powering through. It's just one of those days.
Yes. Okay. Well, we're going to get right into it so that you can eat because nourishment is key. But again, I'm so happy that you're joining us today to talk about mental health, to talk about your organization, Mental Health Emergency Fund, and just your journey in starting this organization and just being an advocate for the space in general. So, in order for people to learn a little bit more about you, I just wanted to start off by asking if you can talk a little bit about your upbringing and a little bit about your childhood.
Oh, taking it back to childhood. Okay, so I was raised in a two-parent home. I have one sister. She's like a year and a half older than me, so we grew up pretty close. Sometimes same group of friends, other times, we had our own friend groups, but I grew up playing sports, so I was a track and field athlete from seventh grade to 12th grade. So that was like my main sport in high school, and I did other like small sports before then. I did gymnastics when I was a kid. Yeah, I was just that kid that was like the straight A student, the head of student council, president of student body. Like I just gravitated towards leadership roles from a young age. And then I went to an all-girls Catholic school. We actually were in Catholic school from like K to 12, so like we wore uniforms forever. So college was the first time that didn't have to wear a uniform. But yeah, so I would say in high school was where I started to really like pick up those leadership skills and like run for office and things like that. And that carried on to college where I was a part of a number of organizations as well on campus. And so I guess I just always have been a leader and different organizations and different environments have like pulled that out of me, I would say.
Yeah, I want to get into leadership in a moment, but I just want to take a step back to your childhood. You know, you were involved in a lot of things. You're close with your family. You said you grew up in a two-parent household. Would you consider yourself like a happy kid, or was mental health even discussed in the household? Like,
Yeah.
take me there.
It definitely wasn't discussed in the household. I would say I was more of like a quiet kid, I would say. I think I would say I was more of a quiet kid. I remember that my dad got me my first journal probably at age 13, and I started to like really kind of connect with my emotions and my feelings, and I like haven't stopped journaling since I was 13 years old. But I think that the only way that I would say mental health showed up for me in my life when I was younger was like I would get sick to my stomach before track meets. Like every single track meet, it was just like I had like performance anxiety. Um, but it didn't really show up anywhere else until later in life. In terms of, friend group, I think I was definitely like that goody two shoes kid. Like I didn't get into trouble. I wasn't out with the kids who were partying and stuff. Like I just kind of, stayed in my lane. But yeah, like definitely mental health was not talked about, even though I have some family members who have mental health challenges, diagnoses, things like that. That just wasn't talked about. It was just something that you knew of, but you didn't really acknowledge. And so it wasn't until like my adult years that I ended up like having conversations with my parents about my
Yeah.
own mental health.
I
Yeah.
think that's definitely a sign of the times too. I think like you and I are around the same age, and I don't remember mental health being talked about at all in my household, but
Yeah.
I knew that there were different coping mechanisms that we would talk about, like we would talk about journaling, or we would talk about like expressing our feelings, but we didn't have like the actual vocabulary to express what we were going through. But when you talked about running a track meet and getting sick to your stomach before a race, like that sort of like performance anxiety, I had that as well. But now
Hmm.
today I'm able to say like, oh yeah, I have the jitters or I have performance anxiety. I had no idea what that meant
Yes.
previously. Getting into the mental health emergency fund, I love the name, first of all, because when you think of an emergency fund, you think of, for me, putting money away for a rainy day, or
Yeah.
like putting money aside for something that you really want. And I just want to know from your perspective, like where did that idea come from and what was sort of the initiative starting off?
Yeah, so it started from my own personal story. I took a mental health sabbatical in 2018 and it lasted like 12 to 14 months. And I ended up using my own emergency fund to fund my recovery and my living expenses during that time. So I, resigned from my role and moved back home and decided that I needed to really invest in my mental health. I was soon diagnosed with PTSD, panic disorder, generalized anxiety disorder. And so I needed to really like buckle down and get into therapy. It was the first time I started taking medication. It was just all of those things that I just needed time to really just let itself play out basically. And I was just so grateful that I had saved ahead of time, because in the previous job I was working paycheck to paycheck with no PTO, nothing. Like I just had to like grin and bear it basically. So if I had a bad mental health day, still had to go into work, or if I didn't go into work, I would, not get paid or anything like that. And so I knew that I wanted to create an emergency fund in case a rainy day happened, like you said. And I had a feeling that once for me, I was building this emergency fund for my own mental health, like in case a career transition came. I wanted to have that space to just take time to just breathe, basically. And so I thought that I was going to be just breathing for 3 months or so, get back on my feet, find a new job, but it ended up being over a year that I was out of work. And I realized that that emergency fund really was crucial for my mental health.
Can you talk about the moments leading up to the sabbatical? Like, where were you in life that you needed this break? And sort of like, it's just so cool to me to hear that you even had the forethought to think of how you were going to save so that you could take a break. Because a lot of
Yeah.
us are in jobs where we're like, I can't do this anymore, but I don't know, like, do I move home with mom and dad? Do I
Hmm.
like thug it out? Like,
Yes.
what is the it's the fact that you were even able to like think of, okay, I need this break. and this is how I'm going to do it. Like, can you
Yeah.
talk about some of the, if you're willing to share, what led to the diagnoses, what also led to the sabbatical, like, what?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different things that led to all of it like culminating in this big like burnout crash. But I was working a nonprofit job. I was also serving in my church, and I really was that person who gave my all to everything. And so I ran my cup dry, and I didn't have anything to replenish myself. And I was just serving, just doing a lot for other people and not necessarily focusing on my own well being. I wasn't in therapy at that time. Well, I guess I was in therapy towards the end of like before I made that decision. Like I didn't make it like in a vacuum. Like had my therapist to help me kind of take that decision to leave the job. But so that was part of it, was just working myself to the ground and also just serving everyone else. But like I mentioned before, I was diagnosed with PTSD. It wasn't a car crash, but it was a situation where like my car broke down on the highway and I could have like died. I mean, it was middle of 66, and I don't know if it was an angel or whatever. Somebody like pushed me to the side of the road, told me to put my car in neutral. He pushed me to the side of the road and I got to safety. And it wasn't until months later that started experiencing panic attacks while I was driving. And so I feel like that was like a result of what had happened months prior. And this was before I even got that job. And once I got that job, I also was dealing with imposter syndrome because I was a business coach and I myself did not have a business at that time. And so I just felt like every time I stood in front of the class to, teach these classes and things like that, like I felt like I was a fraud. And that just, again, was another layer to what I was dealing with on the surface, was like, feel like a fraud. I'm struggling with my anxiety, struggling with the performance anxiety, and then struggling with this background PTSD. Meanwhile, I had this really long commute to work. And so I was always like coming against my triggers in terms of driving every day back and forth, like basically like 3 hours, an hour and a half back and forth to work, and everything just started to pile up, and I was like, this is too much. Like this is a lot. I'm not getting the support I need. I didn't feel like I had a supportive supervisor. I just feel like she was kind of, I don't know if she was jealous of me because I was so much younger and I was getting notoriety and things or whatever. I don't, we'll call it what it is, but there were just so many things that were building up to this like climax where it was time for me to just break. Like I had a breakdown, and those were some of the main things. And so like during my sabbatical, I really started leading into meditation and started to like change my relationship towards myself and to change my relationship towards driving. Those guided meditations really truly helped save my life, and I still do that to this day. I actually record meditations to my own voice, and that's just something that is like a non-negotiable. Like I have to do it every single day, because I still struggle with some of those things. And yeah, those are some of the impetuses that started me to crash, basically.
So you took this sabbatical and you moved home,
Hmm.
back to Baltimore with your
Yep.
parents, and what you thought was just going to be 3 months turned
Yep.
into a year and a half. Was it a
Yep.
year and a half? A year and
Yep.
a half. And so in this time, you're working on yourself, you're working on guided meditation and trying to get yourself back into center. What was the aha moment that led you to that this could be something that you help others with?
Yeah. So I got a job. So it was 14 months actually. So it wasn't quite a year and a half. It was like 14 months. I got a job in February 2023. So 1 month, I mean 2023, February 2020, 1 month before the pandemic. I got a full-time job, and we were in the office for a month, and then March 2020 happened and we all went virtual. And so that was that wasn't as much of a shock as it was to a lot of other people because I was already living, you know, by myself, in the house for a year prior. So I was used to I was used to kind of working from home or whatever the case is. Um, so I was doing that, and then after about a year at that organization, they did layoffs, and I was one of the people who got let go. And I was like, you know what? I am not going to rely on a job anymore to steer my financial future. Like, I really want to start something of my own.
Yeah.
And I always knew that I wanted to start some sort of fund. Not always, but over the past couple years, I just knew that I wanted to start a fund for therapy for people who were, struggling, who needed support accessing therapy. And so the way that it happened is that there were a couple of opportunities to do these small, really, really small micro grant competitions, and I got second place for my first one, and that started the fund. And then I was like, whatever I win, I'm gonna match it, and that's gonna be the first round of financial assistance that we give to a community member. And so we did that in June 2021. And then the following year, the same organization had another contest, but the pot was a lot larger. Like the first pot was only five, was I got 5,000. I got 500. The winner got 1,000. The second time around in 2022, the pot was up to 25,000, and I was like, "Go big or go home!" Like I'm gonna shoot for the $25,000 grant, and this is a grant where I had to record a video, and then like the community would vote. They would vote for whoever they thought would be the top person, and so like I got my community to vote for me, and ended up getting in the top five. And they were only going to pick two out of the top five to receive the 25,000, but they got more funding, and all five of us got $25,000. So that was like my first real big victory. Like, wow, this could really be a thing. Like, I got $25,000 toward this, or towards this initiative. I hadn't formalized it yet. I hadn't gotten my nonprofit status yet or anything. But I was cooking. I was in the process of it.
Yeah.
And then later that year, I applied to, or I guess before then, I had applied to a fellowship, which was 18 months, and I got into that of November of that year, and that took me all the way up until um, May of 2020 2024. Yeah, this year. I'm like, when timing is weird. It took me to May of 2024. So it was an 18-month fellowship, and that really gave me the space to have a full salary and to just work on my business. And
Yeah.
I during that process, during that 18 months, I got an official certified. I got 501(c)(3) certified as a nonprofit organization, tax exempt, and I just kind of went from there. And to this day, we've been able to give over $39,000 to in financial assistance to community members. We screened over 300 people for anxiety and depression. And the list goes on and on, but it just started as this really, really small seed, and then it just quickly multiplied for sure.
I think, thank you so much for going through that process and like how you got started and the funding that you know, the funding that you had to go out to get to in order to help these people. I think that you're sort of downplaying how much work you put into this, though, for the listeners. Like you, the crowdfunding, the reaching out to donors, the just raising money to
Hmm.
help people who are having challenges either finding their medications or seeking mental health services. And I just think that it's huge of you to be able to go out and do that for people. And I actually have a statistic here that I found that I thought was interesting, and you can kind of speak towards it. But I was reading that mental health in Mental Health America, they reported that 27 million adults are untreated for mental health illness in the United States. And I wanted to mainly having to do with the financial barriers that are such a significant hurdle. Can you speak to that a little bit and how some of the financial barriers, but also how it affects marginalized groups, communities especially?
Yeah, for sure. So in the state of Maryland, or in the state of Maryland, specifically in Baltimore, where I am, over 24% live below the poverty line as compared to 9.9% of the rest of the state of Maryland. And so this is an area where there's a lot of financial need. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to stay in Baltimore in terms of creating this organization and staying to my roots because I'm from here. As I was building back my own mental health, like I utilized resources that were here as well. And then I kind of like leaned into the small business community here as well. So like this made sense for me to be in Baltimore. But when it comes to the financial barriers, when we see about 40% of our applicants are uninsured, and so that means that they would have to be paying out of pocket for therapy services, and that just is that's unattainable for a lot of people. So it's unattainable, inaccessible, the list goes on. And so we really wanted to be able to kind of bridge that gap and say, hey, like, we're going to give you financial assistance to be able to access therapy. And that has been just like, revolutionary in terms of how it's helped the people who we've been able to support because a lot of them, we even asked about questions around their savings, around their emergency fund. They're like, emergency fund, what is that? Like, I have zero in savings. Like, I don't have any savings at all, and I'm barely getting by week to week. It's just really kind of grim in terms of the statistics that we see come through every time we do an application. And so, yeah, like in terms of just all these people getting that are undiagnosed, or they may have a diagnosis, but they're not getting treated for it. People are just kind of walking around and dealing with things as best they can. They're coping as best they can. They're self-medicating. They're doing all those things. We really wanted to be able to like kind of get our grasp on at least what we can do here in the Baltimore area, and then hopefully it gets larger and larger as time goes on and we reach more cities, more regions, and things like that. But yeah, the financial barrier is huge, and we have seen that we have been able to allow people to stay with their therapists, so they don't have to see a therapist in our directory, even though that's part of one of the services that we provide is that we are building a therapist directory of Black and brown therapists in the Baltimore area. And so we would love for people to, choose a therapist from our network. But, if they already have their therapist, we want to make sure that they are able to stay safe and stay on their own treatment plan with their own therapist. And sometimes they just need some money to continue with that. And so those are some of the ways that we have been able to support those people.
I love that. And in addition to the financial barriers, the Mental Health America reported also that only 1 in 3 Black adults seek mental help when they need it.
Yeah.
And the people that you're serving with the Mental Health Emergency Fund are people in marginalized communities, Black and brown people.
Yeah.
Why do you think that, and I guess it's a two-part question. Why do you think that only 1 in 3 Black adults are seeking mental health help? And in addition, how are you reaching and telling those people in the Baltimore community that you guys exist?
Yeah. So another statistic that I saw is that 65% of Black people, I don't know if it was adults or just in general, see a mental health struggle, a mental health diagnosis as a personal weakness. And that leads to the stigma of mental health in general. Is like if you see it as a personal weakness, then you're not going to seek support, or you're going to feel like I'm not strong, like I am weak. I'm weak for having, dealing with these things, and it just kind of takes a toll on the person's view and sense of self. And so I think that's why that number exists in terms of 1 in 3 adults seek help, is because they don't see it as they don't want to be part of the statistics. They don't want to be part of that number, and so they try to just stay away from it. Other times, it is those barriers. It's the stigma, and it's the financial barriers, and it's you know, I just culturally in the Black community, it was frowned upon to share your business with somebody, to sit in front of somebody and share your business. It's what goes on in the house stays in the house type of thing, and a lot of times like that's still prevalent in the minds of maybe some older generations. I feel like our generation and Generation Z were definitely better in terms of taking care of our mental health and saying, hey, like, I need a therapist, I have a therapist, or I'm proud of my therapist, let me share my therapist with you type of thing. But, in our parents' generation, it was definitely different. And so I think that was what contributes to the 1 in 3 for sure.
All right, guys, can I get a little personal with you real quick? A few months ago, I turned 30 years old. The big 3-0. My whole life, I've loved birthdays. I love big parties and new memories with friends and family and opportunities. I never really thought about the number or what the next year could look like until this year, when something about turning 30 stopped me in my tracks, and I decided it was time to get a little serious. I started to reevaluate a lot of things in my life. What I wanted to do with my time, what I wanted to achieve in my personal life, what kind of woman I wanted to become. And I thought to myself, one of the first things I need to do is get my money right. Gratefully, I grew up in a household where we had conversations about money around the dinner table. Discussions about the stock market, debt, 401k, financial independence. No topic was off limits. I thought I was in a good place managing my own money until I started planning my future, and I had no clue where to begin. This made me turn to a financial advisor. Working with a financial advisor has been an enlightening journey that has brought me incredible value in more ways than I initially anticipated. Having a dedicated advisor taught me a discipline around finances that I hadn't experienced before, challenging me to prioritize my goals and align my spending with what truly matters. I've also come to better appreciate the worth of my time, realizing that how I spend both my time and my money directly impacts my long-term success. One of the most empowering aspects of working with a financial advisor has been learning strategies and techniques to make my money work for me. These are concepts that we just don't learn in school. From tax optimization to investment strategies and retirement planning, I've gained insights that I could have never developed on my own. Having someone guide me through complex financial decisions has been far more beneficial than trying to handle everything myself. With a financial advisor's expertise, I've been able to approach financial independence with clarity and confidence, knowing that I have a trusted partner who understands my aspirations and can help me make informed choices. Chosen Advisory Group caters to the ambitious, the established mid-career professionals, and those on the cusp of retirement who recognize the dedication required to attain financial independence. With their experience and clear professional guidance, you can transform your financial goals into a reality. Life is stressful. Money should not be. Begin your journey to financial clarity. You can schedule your complimentary consultation at www.chosenadvisorygroup.com today. All right, we've all been there. You're looking for a new job and you're having no luck. This was my story 6 months ago. I had been applying to jobs like it was my full-time job. Every new task or achievement from work added to the resume. Anyone I saw on LinkedIn doing the job I wanted, I was sliding into those DMs. At one point, I almost gave up on writing a cover letter altogether. What was I doing wrong? When I met Kamara, it turned out I was doing a lot of things wrong. She revamped my resume with the proper keywords and taught me how to highlight my achievements. Even more, when I enrolled in the interview prep, she took me through a rigorous training of answering questions concisely and providing me with the strategies I needed to stand out in the interview. Since 2018, Kamara has helped professionals like you achieve life-changing transformations, jumping from 50K to 105K, all the way to 432K. Wait, 432K? I might need to hit her back up. Anyway, Kamara is hosting a masterclass providing you with the tools you need to maximize your earning potential and stand out in front of the hiring managers in today's competitive market. If you're ready to work with Kamara, sign up for her masterclass. You can go to dcowmember.com/event. I like that you had mentioned that it is generationally. I do think that our parents are less likely to share what they were going through mentally than we are today. What sort of like demographic are you seeing right now with your organization?
Yeah, so we have a couple of like check boxes when we do our applications. We start at 18 or older, so we do start with adults. So we have check boxes of eight. It was like maybe like 18 to 23, 24 to 27, and then like 30 and up or 40 and up. I don't know. I don't know all the, I don't remember how all the boxes are, but basically most of the people who see us are in like the early mid 20s, early 30s. Those are like the people who see it. So that kind of tracks Gen Z and millennials
Yeah.
that see
And
us.
can you walk us through like the application process for those seeking mental health like stipends through your funding?
Yeah, so we currently for this year we've been doing it quarterly. So we've had enough funding to do it quarterly, which we're really grateful for. So our application process is a little bit more robust than maybe some applications that are out there, just because we want to gather a lot of data around the people who we're serving. Like, who are these people? And so we definitely ask questions around the state of their mental health. So we have a screening tool called Care Measured, which screens for anxiety and depression and like what's called your life impact score. So how much is what you're dealing with in terms of anxiety, depression, like how much is it affecting your daily life to do chores, to go to work, to get out of bed, to do things like that. Like we populate two different scores, and from that, like we'll see who's in the normal, moderate, or severe range, and that kind of helps us kind of choose who is probably most need of help. And then we also ask about their narrative, kind of like, what is your mental health story? Kind of tell us your story. They can tell us it audio, they can write it, they can do a video. We want to make sure that it's, accessible to many types of people. We ask about their financial status. So we ask, are they employed? Are they underemployed? Self-employed, things like that. We kind of want to get a sense about that, and then what are their spending and saving habits, if they have any at all. And that's where we find the most that people don't have any money in savings. They spend what they have on bills, and sometimes they're choosing between getting a medication that they need and paying for groceries. And I'm just like, this breaks my heart that these are the decisions that a lot of people have to make. And we don't want that to be the case. We want them to be able to afford both, right?
Right.
So with that, we ask them if they want a budgeting tool that I've created to kind of help them with their finances, just in general, whether or not they get the funding, just to kind of have in their toolbox to maybe help them, day to day, week to week, month to month. And then we also ask them about their insurance information. Are you uninsured? What insurances do you have? Because we have a list of therapists in our therapy directory who take a number of insurances. So it's just helpful in terms of matching, what insurances they have. And then we ask them. I'm trying to think of the questions. Like, we ask them how soon they're willing to see a therapist. Like, is it soon as possible, or can you wait 1 to 2 months, 3 to 4 months, things like that, just to kind of see, like, kind of triage basically the people who are coming through. And what I forgot to mention in the very beginning, which we added maybe 2 rounds ago, was we asked questions around suicidality, and that's a big piece that we wanted to make sure that we asked. And then we gave people resources, like we gave people the 988, suicide prevention crisis line, and then we've also asked questions about domestic violence, and we have a Baltimore local partner that deals with domestic violence, and so we've asked people, if you're comfortable sharing, these are the resources if this is where you are. And so it gets really heavy, So my team of my advisory committee who goes through these applications, my review team, they, after we go through all these applications and things like that, like it's heavy. It can be heavy in the room or in the Zoom because we do it virtually, but it's just like we are really dealing with people's lives,
Yeah.
and this is something that we don't want to take lightly, and we want to make sure that we are doing it in the most equitable way, that we're reducing bias. So we actually have a rubric that goes along with the application where we score people according to, some of the questions that we ask. And that's kind of how we come up with our numbers and ultimately make our decisions around who gets those stipends for that quarter. But it's a hard decision. There are a lot of times where people are, vying for one person or multiple people because part of the story might resonate with one person versus another person. And what's great about our team is that we are able to, like, all listen to each other and, hear each other out when it's like, hey, but did you see this person who's going through this? And they might have funds in this way, but this person has zero case for getting funding or getting support. So, we all kind of use our own lenses to kind of assess the situation, which is really, really needed and really important.
You touched on a really important part of earlier when you mentioned that some people have to choose between eating and getting their medications.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to like take a pause on that because that's huge. And the fact that someone has to decide whether they're going to nourish themselves because or afford their medications, like how frequently or how often can one person get funding from you guys? Like it
Yeah.
could be, is it month? You touched on it a little bit, but is it like month to month, or is it like, can you be, I guess, sort of sponsoring somebody for like a year, few years? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so right now we don't have the capacity we would love to sponsor somebody for a whole year, but right now we give away our financial assistance in the form of $500. And so we work with our partner therapists to be able to give discounts for out of pocket costs. And so at the lowest end, if we have a therapist who works on a sliding scale, and let's say that their rate is $30 out of pocket per person, with that $500 they can see that person for 16 sessions. So that's on the lower end. On the higher end, for some of our clinicians, they might see someone for $100 per session versus which is still a discount because maybe the out of pocket rate is 175 or something.
Right.
And so the client is able to see them for at least 5 sessions to get them going, to get them started, and then potentially they'll start a contract with their therapist and maybe go on a sliding scale after that. But at least we can at least give between 5 to 16 sessions each time that we give our stipends out. So that's been great. And then we also have a couple of people who can do pro bono work, and that depends on how what their caseload is. But they've been able to give do pro bono work. And then after every round of applications, we tell people, and even in the actual application, we tell people, if you don't get selected for this round, we have a partner organization called Pro Bono Counseling, and they can see you free of charge anytime. Call them, please call them. Like, call them, get connected to them, get screened by them, and get seen by someone who's in the Maryland area, because they see all of Maryland, not just Baltimore. And you can say what your preference is. If you want to see someone who is BIPOC, you can say that. So they try their best to match people according to what their need is, and they have much larger capacity than we have. They have like a caseload of like, they have about like 100, or not 100, 800 clinicians on staff, and they can see about like 3,000 people a year. And so we always refer out to them when our applications go open, and we're just like, just so you know, like, this resource exists, and they're willing and ready to take you now. And so of course it's hard to receive that email that says, I'm sorry that you haven't been chosen, but like we also want them to know, yes, and you have
Right.
these resources too. Like we are not the end all be all resource. There are plenty of resources in Baltimore, and this is another one. And we really hope that you take the next step to call them. So that's what's been important for us.
I was reading also, which I think is super cool, a super cool piece of your organization is that you not only provide stipends for traditional therapy, but also holistic wellness practices.
Yeah.
And why was it important for you to include non-traditional forms of therapy as part of the solution?
Yeah, because I think that, traditional Western talk therapy doesn't work for everybody. A lot of people who might have gone through like serious trauma, they need like somatic therapy. They might need like integrative massage therapy. They might need stretch therapy. They might need yoga and other things like that really get to the core of, what it is that they may be dealing with, and it could be maybe they don't trust regular talk therapists. I don't know, we're not necessarily getting into that, but it's just the fact that we want to be able to meet our clients where they are, and a lot of times they want more of those non-traditional, maybe Eastern practices or even just indigenous practices that we don't see all the time. We just kind of hear therapy, 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 but there are a lot more ways to heal, and even sound therapy. Like that's another thing that some of these things are newer, or not that they're newer, but we're starting to hear about it more. And
Yeah.
so those are some other ways that people get the support that they need.
You touched on this earlier, but you talked about that you're building a directory where your people that you're working with can find Black and Brown therapists. And I know that in during COVID 2020, especially after George Floyd, that was like the main thing that people of color were trying to find people that looked like them, that they could to that they could talk to. Why do you think that it was so important for you to like create this directory where people can go to find a resource? Because as someone who goes to therapy, it is extremely hard to find a Black therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, so can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the reasons why it's extremely hard, but also it's laborious. Like, if you just go to maybe Psychology Today or something, you have to like scroll through so many people, and you gotta click the insurance and click the type of person you want. Like, it can just be like this non-ending, what feels like this non-ending search for whoever you're looking for in terms of provider. And so we just wanted to bring it right to them. We wanted to say that these are people that we've vetted. These are people in network with us. We've had conversations with them. They've been on our podcast, so that people can listen to the podcast episode with them to kind of hear, what their modalities are, what their personality is, can you vibe with them, that sort of thing. So that's like another reason why I started the podcast, was so it could be more relatable to them, versus just reading a profile on Psychology Today.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really important because people want to see therapists that are representative of them. They want to see them, whether it's race or whether it might be an identity that they have, that they share. They want to feel seen. They want to feel valued, and a lot of times they don't find that with non-BIPOC therapists.
Yeah, I do think just, from experience, having gone through all of, you said psychology.com, Better Health, there's a tab where you can try to find Black therapists as well, ZocDoc, all of it. And it's laborious, it's time consuming. And then there's a point where you're just like, I just need help.
Yes.
So you give up and you just try to find the one that has like the accolades or something, someone that sort of resembles you. Maybe they have curly hair like you. I don't know.
Right.
But no, I just wanted to really harp on that there is a site and a podcast that people can go to find people that look like them that they could use for therapy. I'm curious, having done this work for some time now, what's sort of the impact that you've seen in your work so far?
Yeah, great question. So I think I mentioned a little bit of the stats so far. So over the past 3 years, we've been able to give close to 40,000 in financial support. We have been able to screen over 300 people for anxiety and depression. Um, we've been able to give those stipends to over 30 people. Right now, we are able to do it, able to give away at least seven per quarter. So we would definitely love that number to be larger. So we would love more funding and things like that. But we've also just gotten our name out. So we've been in the press. So we've been in the Baltimore Banner. We've been in Voyage Baltimore. We've been in Baltimore Fishbowl. So our name, our organization is spreading. I've done, different podcasts as well. And I've also been in different fellowship and cohort experiences that have given me the skill sets, the knowledge, the training to be able to really make this a sustainable business. And we're continuing to grow. So we've also been able to hire staff, which is, I feel like that's like a huge milestone in any business to be able to hire staff. So I'm on payroll, and then I've also have been able to, like, I had two interns over the summer, and then I have a podcast director. Then I had an outreach and communications associate who was the one like getting us all that press and things like that. So just being able to say that we've been able to hire people like that's a big deal. And then of course, like when we get those testimonials back from people who say like, this has changed my life, this has saved my life, I don't know what I would have done without you all, thank you so much. Like those things mean a lot. It can just be from one person, but that one person, we see them and we know that the fund really is aimed at the one. Like we're really trying to help people one person at a time. Because it's expensive, and it's expensive to be able to say, we're giving away like $40,000 but help 30 people. Like we are, it takes a lot, it's a lot of money to pay for therapy. Like that's just the reality of it. And so it's really great when we've been able to have organizations come around us and support us in the work that we're doing, because we are not reaching like super large numbers. In the case that we've been able to screen 300 people for anxiety and depression and things like that, I also will say that we've also been able to lead those people to other resources like pro bono counseling. And then a lot of times we see a lot of intersectional needs. So we've seen people who have food insecurity and housing insecurity. And so we've been able to, compile resources for people who need that as well. We have a partner therapist who her organization does rental assistance every month. And so that is now something that I promote every month that it comes out. Like people might think it comes from us, but it's like, no, it's not from us. We're just promoting it. But she does rental assistance every month because so many people are facing eviction, and, a therapist might not be the first thing they need. They might need a roof over their head,
Yeah.
and so those are the conversations that we have sometimes when we're going over the applications, where it's like, what is their primary need? Do they really need therapy right now, or do they need a roof over their head, or do they need financial assistance? I mean, assistance for like food, that type of thing.
No, and that's so important too, because it's all a web. Like it all stems from something. Like our
Yeah.
mental health is in existence because our of all of these things that we're going through, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's education, whether it's like homelessness, housing, like all of the things. And so the fact that you are partnering with all of these other organizations to help the real problem at its core is just amazing. And it seems such like an oxymoron in that you mentioned like therapy is expensive, and like therapy is like, it shouldn't be a want, it's a need, and yet you have to pay so much for it. And so I think that on one hand is so unfortunate, but on the other hand that you're doing the work to help it become accessible to people. I would love to know, as like a closing question, like what are you most proud of personally or about for the organization or anything?
That's such a great question. I would say I am most proud of being able to build this organization to where it is while I'm struggling with my own mental health, to be honest. Like, it's really hard to be someone who has their own mental health challenges and go out in the world and be an advocate and also just like build this thing when sometimes you're not feeling well, like, and so I think that I've done a pretty good job with my own, ups and downs and things like that. So I think that I'm definitely proud of that. But I would also say just how much we've been able to grow in the 3 years. Like from that first $500 small grant that we won to our largest grant was $100,000. So that has just been incredible, and I'm just hoping that it continues. So I'm just grateful that there are people who really believe in us and believe in the work that we're doing and can see the vision and align with it and say, hey, we are willing to invest in you.
I think as an advocate and as a business owner, sometimes you're so in the weeds that you don't see what you're actually doing or like how you're actually impacting people. But I just know that admiring you from afar for the last 3 years, and being able to talk to you today and just doing my own research on the organization, I think that you're really helping a lot of people. And I'm really happy that you're here doing the work, because there's a lot of people that need it, and there's a lot of people that don't know they need it. And as long as you are just like the voice for mental health and advocacy, I think that you're doing great work. So I just
Oh,
wanted to
thank
say
you so
that.
much.
And I can't leave this interview without allowing you to share your podcast, how people can hear about it, what it's about, and give us all the details.
Yes, so it's really not a creative name. It's the Mental Health Emergency Fund podcast. So it's the
That's
same
easy
name.
enough. People can find
It's
it.
the same name as the organization, but we're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio, basically wherever you get your podcasts. But we also have a website, which is www.mentalhealthemergencyfund.com. And our main website is www.mentalhealthemergencyfund.org. So there's just a difference between the .com and .org. So the .com is the podcast site. And in it, I have been interviewing therapists that are on the directory and who want to be getting on the directory, to kind of show, that therapists are human too, to be able to see what their modality is, how they practice, how long they've been how long they've been around, for people to kind of see what inspires them, how they go about their work and things like that. So again, it's kind of like thinking about a bio of a therapist, but actually being dynamic and actually hearing a conversation and seeing like, can I see myself maybe in a session with them? Can I see myself maybe in a consultation with them, type of thing. So that's been going on since February, and we just entered into season 3. So I'm excited about that. And I think, thank you. And I think I'm going to start interviewing people with lived experience with mental health issues as well, just so that people can share their own stories. And it's not just us interviewing therapists, but it's us interviewing people who have stories to share.
Yeah. The power of storytelling. And I think that's such an interesting concept, to interview therapists who, I think sometimes we think that our therapists aren't human and they're supposed to solve all of our problems. And so it is, I think I'm going to be listening, I'm going to be tuning in to hear about people's stories who are actually going through mental health illness, but also therapists and what their lives are like on the other side. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on to the show, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Amber. It was great chatting with you.
That's it for this week's episode of A Bright Idea podcast. Today's host was Jessica Smith, founder and executive director of the Mental Health Emergency Fund. If you live in Baltimore and are eligible for funding for mental health services, you can apply on the Mental Health Emergency Fund's website, located in the link in description. If you would like to support by donating to the Mental Health Emergency Fund, you can also do that by going to their website. I hope you've all been as inspired as I have by Jessica's ability to serve her community while also navigating her own mental health challenges. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us bring more stories like Jessica's to the forefront. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at A Bright Idea Podcast for updates, and if there's a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from next, drop us a message. As always, thank you for listening and keep pushing your bright ideas forward. Until next time, I'm Amber Key.